over last 2 days, when we had the national conference, I would like to inform that I was the same moderator for the national conference on disability last year as well. And I have to do the same thing this year as well. So what we did was we tweaked a little bit this year. We wanted the conference to become more participative, not necessarily always having someone presenting or discussing something and rest passively listening. So we made sure that all the participants who attended for last 2 days put forward their ideas, their recommendations, their suggestions on improving the ways to transform the solutions that we have. So based on that, we have come up with a number of recommendations. And therefore, the recommendations, I would like to make a note here that does not come from just some of us, but it is a recommendation by the whole group who attended for last 2 days. With this, I would like to invite Norbu, Director for Bhutan Foundation, to present the recommendations.
Your Excellency, Lyonpo, Ministry of Education, Honorable Secretary, Education, Dashos, Heads of Development Agencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, parents and children gathered here, a very good afternoon. Keeping in line with the Global Disability theme for this year, we had this conference themed Transformative Solutions for Inclusive Communities in Bhutan. As the MC mentioned, like every year we have been conducting such seminars and forums, and we have talked about it far too long. So now it's a call for a stronger resolve for actions. I would like to begin by quoting Helen Keller, a deaf-blind, a very inspirational disability rights advocate. I quote, "A person who is severely impaired never knows his hidden source of strength until he is treated like a normal human being and encouraged to shape his own life," unquote. We started this conference with a lot of introspection and reflection on our current systems and services by asking the very hard and uncomfortable questions on: are persons with disability and children with disability able to access all activities and environment on an equal basis? Does our education system provide children with disability the experiences that result in readiness to work, to live independently, and a full, meaningful life as contributing adults in the community? So these provoked a lot of thoughts and the panel discussions and the various presentations, a lot of discussions around the issues surrounding persons with disability, and the barriers were discussed. So collectively, we have come up with a set of recommendations. So it's my utmost privilege to present the outcomes and resolution of the conference that were collectively raised by all stakeholders that participated in the conference for your kind consideration. The first recommendation is there is need to strengthen cross-sectoral collaboration and coordination. Many organizations provide different services, which leads to duplications and lack of concerted efforts by stakeholders. We recommend to form a consortium of organizations and stakeholders working in this disability field that can help coordinate efforts, drive collective voice and action on common agenda. The consortium can serve as a platform for stakeholders to network, harmonize plans and actions, and collectively push the disability and inclusive agenda forward. Recommendation 2, there has been a lot of issues raised on this around addressing the gap between policy and implementation. Bhutan has made tremendous progress in recent times with the adoption of disability policy in 2019, expansion of SEND programs, various guidelines and standards that are put in place by the Ministry of Education. However, much remains to be done, as we all agree, in addressing policy, the gap between policy and implementation. I would just like to cite a few examples. In the National Policy on Special Education 2012, it states, education on equal basis for early childhood to vocational to tertiary without any discrimination. Every child will be supported to complete basic education, and additional support will be provided. As per the Annual Education Statistics 2021, there are 758 students with disability enrolled. However, this data does not capture the ones enrolled in the private schools. If we are to hold the disability prevalence of 20%, which was done some 2011-2012, between the age of 6 to 12, if that still holds, that 20% the figure would be far higher. So I don't agree with the data on enrollment at 758 students. Likewise, the National Policy on Disability, there were several clauses on developing strategies to make reasonable accommodations within education infrastructures and to incorporate the universal design in new education infrastructure. However, we realize a mother still needs to carry her son on her back to access the school facilities. That is, in fact, in a sense, school that I'm talking about. A child with neuro and muscular conditions still needs to rely on help to access basic facilities like toilet. The National Inclusive Education Standard 27 was set pretty high. A minimum standard is to provide 1 to 2 assistant teachers where there are children with disability. However, in practice, a teacher must attend to more than 40 plus children in the class. So how can accommodations and support be provided in that inclusive classroom setting? Hence, the implementation and the extent of integration of standards and policies need to be reviewed, and stakeholders, including persons with disabilities, need to be involved and consulted, actually be consulted for any policy and plan development. The third recommendation is to leverage on the potential of technology for developing assistive devices to improve accessibility and inclusion. We had a very invigorating discussion on this topic, on how we can use assistive technology to build independence. We understand there is tremendous potential for technology to improve the lives of persons with disability in terms of learning and development, but it requires collaboration with teachers, parents, rehabilitation professionals, and we just learned, for some of us, that there is a superfab lab right here in Thimphu, and the engineers, the innovators there are willing to partner to develop contextualized and customized devices which meets the needs of individual children. Such a platform, again, should be accessible and available for all stakeholders and not confined to certain groups. There are several innovations that were developed for persons with disability which have wider benefits. There were so many examples of innovations like text messaging was actually created for persons with disability. Now it is an indispensable form of communication that we use. And a simple tool like potato peeler, I'm sure like most of us are familiar with, which we use in the kitchen, was actually invented for people with muscular and arthritis condition. So when we design for disability or adopt a universal design principle, it benefits everybody and the entire community. Again, when we talk about assistive technology and devices, it need not be expensive. It can be high-tech, expensive to any simple devices, but it can make a whole lot of difference in the lives of persons with disability, children, and the wider community. The fourth recommendation is to review the current model of SEND schools to expand the understanding and integration of inclusive education. One pertinent issue that came out in several forums and highlighted again in this conference was there's limited capacity of teachers to address and provide accommodations even in SEND schools. Our teachers are not fully equipped to teach in an inclusive setting, which is further exacerbated by enrollment pressures. Hence, the proposal from the conference and by the group is if the current model of SEND school could be reviewed to make all schools inclusive. Inclusive education must become the norm and practice for all schools and not just confined to a small group of teachers or few schools. Again, enrollment should not stop at the understanding of enrollment. It has to be provided with accommodations and support for the children. We shouldn't let children be enrolled, let them struggle, turn 18 years of age, and pass it on as a headache for some other institution. The fifth recommendation is we would like to propose a single curriculum with the pedagogy and assessment that ensures choice and meets the individual needs. The current curriculum choices are limiting and results in segregation, and it's not adequately preparing children with disability. The current way of different curriculum setting lower standards lowers the expectations and lowers the learning outcomes of such children. And putting them in different categories is already predefining where they should be, and it defeats the whole purpose of inclusion. The sixth recommendation is to strengthen the teacher and the ECCD facilitator capacity. Many teachers here express that while they want to help children with disability, they don't know how to. Teachers from private ECCDs and schools have enrolled quite a number of children with disability. I'm quite surprised to see these were not recorded in the education statistics. Also, the standards and guidelines and inclusive education materials prepared by Ministry of Education needs to extend to private schools and the ECCDs. The seventh recommendation is to expand health, referral, and intervention services to rural communities. As we have heard just before me, the father expressing how children with disabilities in the rural communities suffer and face a lot of difficulties in terms of accessing services. Many parents have to leave their jobs and relocate for their children to avail these services, which are mostly concentrated in Thimphu. And although parents are aware such services exist, children start intervention at a late age because the parents could not make that adjustment. For instance, in Wangsel school, it shows like by the time children are enrolled in Wangsel, they are of certain age, like by 8, 9, or 10, because they are partly not aware, partly because it was not accessible for all parents. So we would like to propose that there are centers in at least 2 or more places, perhaps in Monga and Gelfu, that might improve accessibility for the unreached. The seventh recommendation is to strengthen legal systems and create awareness on existing legal services. While we understand Bhutan is the only South Asian country that has not ratified to the UNCRPD, yet again, ratifying to the UNCRPD doesn't mean things on the ground pans out well. We have excellent policies in place, excellent guidelines and standards put in place. Yet, the enforcement of these policies and the guidelines are where the gaps are. We have learned that there are several initiatives already taken to improve access to legal aid and justice for persons with disability. However, many persons with disabilities and service providers lack awareness, and they need the support to access these services. So we propose for creating more awareness for persons with disability as well as service providers, and to provide legal aid services for persons with disabilities. The ninth recommendation is there is a need to harmonize the disability policy with other policies so that the persons with disability have access to all services and opportunities available to all citizens of Bhutan. Access to service such as justice, health, education has numerous barriers. A person with disability in the morning said, well, education and health services are free, but because of the barriers, I'm not able to avail those free services. So hence, we need to break down these barriers, and there is a need to create a seamless pathway for persons with disability to transition from education, within education also at various levels, and then to employment, and to review the way that we have in terms of a very segmented policy approach that needs to be reviewed. The last and the final recommendation, there were several others. I'm sure like the participants here would think like we have not been able to capture their points. There were several points raised, but we thought like we will consolidate to 10 recommendations. So the final recommendation is to create support system for families and caregivers of persons with disability. We have heard about the role of family, which is very crucial in the lives of children with disability and persons with disability. This role needs to be recognized and supported through provisions of capacity building, and to look at the extra cost of living with disability. In addition to that, as parents have expressed and shared, parents go through tremendous mental health problems for caring for children and persons with disability. So adequate support and support systems need to be built for families and caregivers. That is the final recommendations, and we hope like it could kindly be considered for certain things to follow up and to be taken on in our plans and policies. Our moderator here also threatened that from next year he will not want to moderate such a conference if we are talking the same issues time and again and nothing is being done. So we will definitely be following up back on this set of recommendations to see where we are. And we hope the conference has motivated all the participants and stakeholders gathered here to go out there and take actions. And as we started this conference yesterday on the note that disability is part of humanity and our community, so let's embrace it to make Bhutan an inclusive society. Thank you.